Today, David is going to talk about succession planning. Okay, now for real. David Klann, you're on.
Woo, no pressure there. um, so I thought of this idea of succession planning mm, back at the beginning of the year, and um, I thought of it with respect to my own little consulting gig. It's like, what if I kicked the bucket or got hit by a bus or something like that? And I'm helping a bunch of stations. Most of them are they don't rely on me for anything day to day, but there's a couple that I do some significant things for, and I started thinking of that in the context of a station. I recently moved from Wisconsin to Minneapolis and left behind the station. I didn't actually leave it behind, but I'm not as close to the station that I built back in uh, 2010. And I started thinking about all the things that could happen when a key person leaves a station or an organization. And so I um, I offered to the NFCB folks to do a webinar on it, and they took me up on the offer. Then I had to learn about it. What I'm going to do here is just sort of replay the presentation that I did for NFCB. And unlike the NFCB one, it wasn't interactive at all. It was just me spewing stuff. So I encourage you to interrupt me and ask questions along the way. But I have actually a presentation with a slide deck, so I'm going to share my screen if that's all right with you guys.
Do I need to do something, David?
I don't
It
think
should
so.
just work. I think that we are
Okay.
at that.
Let's try it.
Yeah, it should work.
You see my thanks screen?
Yes.
Cool. Well, I just wanted to thank the folks that gave me inspiration and made it, sort of greased the skids and helped me produce or help me with information on this, especially the four folks at the stations listed down below: Rima, Marty, Daniel, and Ron. They gave me amazing insight into the idea of succession planning. And although, in general, the NFCB stations are sometimes they're larger, but I think all of these things apply to our stations here. The small ones, the LPFMs, and even um, the ones that are completely volunteer run. So let's see if I got my clicker. It's not working. That figures. Okay. Space bar. Huh. Just a little disclaimer. There might be some truth stretching in this presentation, but really only to make a point, not where it actually matters. So I just wanted to get that out of the way. I want to talk to you about trains, though. That's the thing that really fascinates me. I've been just amazed with trains since I was a kid. My grandfather was a conductor on the Milwaukee Road, and every once in a while I would get to go with him on a ride. And I grew up, half a mile away from a fairly busy railroad track, mostly freight trains, but some passengers as well. And I've been obsessed with trains forever, and I'm especially fascinated with the infrastructure associated with trains. Things like all the stuff that goes into building railroads and the associated infrastructure, like train stations and tracks, and the specialized equipment and tools that are used. It's just amazing to me. I recently learned how tracks are laid down these days, and it's not like in the cartoons and the way you might picture it from the old movies. It's not like there's a piece of track that a couple of folks pick up and nail down into the railroad ties. It's totally automated, and all the rails are welded together, and it's just it takes a huge crew of people like this that you can see in this photo. And the other thing I realized is all the parallels between the rail infrastructure or the railroad industry and community radio. They both start with RA, huh? They're both mature and proven technologies. And railroads have stations just like community radio. You're supposed to laugh. Everybody's muted, I know.
Love it.
Thanks, Stephanie. There is a difference, though. While railroads and sometimes and highways have sometimes divided communities, I think community radio has a pretty good track record of uniting communities and bringing communities together. So, what I'd like to do is start this discussion off with a question that I think has been asked in both of the industries, railroads and community radio. Should the station actually survive? Or if we put it another way, what if the station went dark? Think about all the times that people have asked that question of Amtrak. Amtrak, I don't know, in the 70s and 80s, I think, was declared insolvent and they almost shut it down. But they didn't, and it kept going. And I think that's true for stations. Hopefully none of your stations is like teetering on the brink. I think 99.999% of the time, the answer to the question is a resounding, of course, yeah. What I'm really getting at, though, with this question is, are we fulfilling the station's mission, and are we in touch with communities that we're serving or that we intend to serve? So I just want to put this out there, and I think there's no point in obsessing over this question, but I think it does pay or it's worthwhile bringing it up occasionally, maybe during planning activities, or if you have an offsite strategic planning with your board or something like that. And it also occurred to me that it might be worth asking this question or keeping this question in mind as you go about your daily work with the station. It's like, what is it that guides you, and why is this station here? And I think that's just worthwhile asking that question. And now a short cautionary tale. WMQQ, I bet nobody has heard of it, but it started with an idea. It started with people's passionate desire to bring alternative media to Rapid Waters, USA. It got going with, people meeting and sharing ideas. And if you've been at the start of a radio station like I have, and I know others in this group have been there at the start of a station, you know what a thrill it is. It's just full of energy and all kinds of cool stuff going on, and everybody's excited. Well, WMQQ is no different. They found the perfect space, or at least it was a perfectly suitable space. If I can get my slide to change. Right? It was a perfectly suitable space. It was an empty building right on Main Street in Rapid River, USA. So they filled it with equipment and records and CDs, probably MP3s, and people. And more technology, more stuff, more people. And WMQQ grew into that space, and they became an anchor in speedy waters. And more than an anchor, they became a trusted source for news and public affairs and even entertainment. But then, it always happens. In fact, WMQQ's founder and station manager left the country after the board accused him of embezzling money from the station. And when he left, he took all of the station's passwords to online services, all of the door keys, and worse, all of the cash. Of course, it could be lots of things that occur to stations that cause issues. In this case, more than a bump in the road. In fact, it ended with kind of a catastrophe. The station crashed and burned. They became insolvent and eventually had to abandon their license. And in fact, to this day, you can still see that WMQQ is available in the FCC call sign reservation system. The question is, could MQQ's fate have been avoided? I certainly think so. And in fact, we may never know, but we do know several things.
I was just going to check, David. Did you mean to come out of your presentation? Because we don't see it anymore.
Really? I did not mean to. Did I stop sharing?
Maybe that's what happened.
Yeah. Let's see if I can. That's unfortunate. I'm on this slide. Can you see it?
There we go. Now it's back.
Thanks. Well, you didn't miss anything in terms of pictures. What I was going to say is when you come to a fork in the road, take it. At every decision point, there's a universe for every possible outcome. And in hindsight, we can clearly see that there were many decisions made that led to WMQQ's demise. But I think things could have gone differently, even with the catastrophe that hit them, the station manager taking money and things. I got to click more carefully so I don't kill the share again. I think they could have spent more time planning for succession in the eventual or even sudden change in leadership. I think you can plan for it too. It's a common practice at a lot of stations to just do planning in general. I mean, me personally, I'm planning averse, but when it comes to organizations, I think it's important. And I think it pays to think about changes that may affect your station, both sudden and gradual changes. Things like these. Think about population swings. I know in Vernon County, where we built WDRT, the population has remained fairly consistent over the years. But I know that it's not uncommon for population swings to happen, and both growth and decline. How about competition? Public radio, the internet with podcasts and things like that. Volunteer engagement changes over time, right? It sort of comes and goes. People are interested, and then they realize how much work it is, and they fade away. That kind of stuff changes over time. Disasters. I mean, this has been a year of crazy disasters, right? Especially, I think folks out in California have been hit especially hard, but all over the country, down south, out east, depending on the year, it's either floods or fires or both or hurricanes, whatever. I'm sure that you can think of other things that would affect your station. So I'd like to share a few of the things, and these are actually some of the things that got me thinking about this in the first place. I like to think of these as funnels, or things like choke points or constriction points, whatever you want to call them. They're the critical elements that might prevent the continuity of your station. So here's just a laundry list of things that I've sort of identified. And seriously, I thought these were the main points of succession planning when I started down this path. But after scratching the surface of the topic, I've learned that these technical aspects are sort of the easiest things to take care of. So make a checklist and, make sure that no one person holds all the passwords, or that your software license, that people know how to get those paid for if you've bought software. Facilities keys, make sure that there's no one person has like all of the keys to the place. all the other administrative and financial responsibilities. If you've got a volunteer bookkeeper, make sure that somebody else at least knows what they're doing. And again, at stations that don't have many resources, it's, there's probably one person doing a lot of these things. Well, I think it's important to make sure that you've got a backup for those people. So these are some of the technical aspects of succession planning or transition planning. And they're certainly not the only things, but I think that it's important to get these fundamentals right. And I hope other people can add to this list of things. And being the nerd that I am, I tend to make connections between the geek culture that I'm involved with, that is open source software, and community radio culture. And I attended a conference this past summer. It was an online conference, and one of the sessions that caught my eye was succession planning for open source projects. And I'll have a link to this because I think it's definitely worth your 50 minutes of watching it. The video's up on YouTube, and it was a 4-person panel, and they talked about things that are, I think, directly relatable to our radio stations. So one of the suggestions that they had that stood out to me was mentor and cultivate new leaders. So again, if you have more than a few people, and if you are aware of other people that are interested in leadership positions at your station, cultivate them and be intentional about that evolution of those people coming into your station. And along with that, build this planning into your station's governance model. So write these things down and build it into your planning. Write in your station's bylaws, or maybe your mission statement, but certainly basic planning documents for your station. I like this one a lot. Hand out titles like candy. Like in open source culture as well as community radio culture, I think that this flies in the face of convention. Like in the corporate world, you've got to earn that title that you've got, and it's all a meritocracy and stuff like that. But why not just hand out titles? If somebody's interested in helping out with succession planning, make them the chief succession officer or whatever. And it doesn't apply just to succession planning. Everything. Hand out titles and make titles up. It recognizes people, and it lets them know that you appreciate what they're doing for the station, and might even help get them more engaged and help them to contribute even more than they are. And of course, hopefully this one's obvious, but this one struck me: transparency in decision making and in planning and record keeping. Make things as public as you possibly can. In that vein, here's another thought. Consider, and this is again my geekiness coming out. Consider approaching succession planning or transition planning as if it was an exercise in specifically planning for a disaster. When I worked at an internet service company, I've worked at a couple, and we've had data centers, and we had disaster recovery plans, and it's in the data center world, it's specifically called business continuity and disaster recovery. And that idea includes planning for the loss of leadership positions, people in leadership positions. In fact, there's even a standard for developing this kind of documentation or developing plans for data centers. And it's of all organizations that sponsor this standard, it's the American Institute of CPAs, which, what do they have to do with data centers? But they've come up with this thing called the system and organization controls, trust service principles. There'll be a test. I expect you to remember that. Joking. They've got this thing, this system and organization controls, or SOC 2. It's SOC level 2. And this is sort of, for data centers, you have this sort of continuous circle of security, availability, processing integrity, and all these other things. But specific in the availability is disaster recovery. What if this data center that we're running, blows up or gets wiped out by a tornado or burns down? I think that these things can apply to our stations, and it gives us a framework for planning for succession and for transition. In this case, it's in the face of a disaster, but I think you can look at it, put a different lens on it and look at it as normal succession planning. I mean, the truth is, we're all going to move on from our radio stations, whether we get old and pass away, or if we just, if we move out of the city where the station is or whatever. We're not going to be there forever. And so this is going to happen at your station, whether you have thought about it or not. So this is the technical or the mechanical, what I sometimes like to think of as the hardware side of succession planning. Let's look at the squishy stuff. And this is where I get off, because I'm not a squishy kind of guy. I'm more of a, nuts and bolts, and let's just get down to the brass tacks of doing things. But I realize the importance of this. And in the case of transition planning, it's all about the station's culture. What's the attitude of the management team or the leaders at the station, and how do they approach dealing with the volunteers and dealing with staff? How does the board interact with the staff and that kind of thing? So I just basically encourage you to talk about these things, the pros and cons of cultural changes as the station evolves. New leaders coming in are going to cause the culture to change. I mean, that's from the people that I interviewed. It was clear that is a thing that happens. And in my experience with other organizations, it's clear that happens. So the question is, how do we make sure that the culture is true to the vision statement for the station and the mission statement for the station? And do we want to maintain the culture with a management change, or do we want to shake things up a little bit, completely, explicitly disrupt the culture? I mean, my first reaction to this question is avoiding culture shock is probably the most reasonable approach. But what if you've lost track with what your community is doing, or what if you're out of touch with your community? And things, the community has changed and you weren't aware of it. Maybe shaking things up is necessary. You're probably not going to know this. You're not going to know the answer to this question while you're doing your succession planning. But I think it's important to keep this in front of you while you're planning. Like, when this transition takes place, how do we want to deal with the culture of the station? So we have the technical challenges, and we have the cultural or the squishy challenges. These are some of the technical challenges, and then we have the cultural challenges. And I didn't itemize these things, but as you can see in this little spherical squishy circle, it's how we approach the running of the station, how we deal with each other, how we work, how we talk to each other, how we communicate, all that kind of stuff. Those things by themselves are not a huge deal, and they're pretty straightforward. But when you put them together, you put the cultural and technical challenges together, I think that's where things get even more fun. And I was kind of shocked to hear Rima Dial say when I was talking to her, you know, replacing the senior leadership at a station, like the executive director or the founder or a board member, is actually way easier than replacing operational people like your chief engineer or your technical person, especially if that person's been there from the very beginning. You know, that person is the person that knows everything about how to keep the station up and running and on the air. So it's really important to pay attention to these things and be aware of the issues around the sort of replacing people when you're thinking about succession planning. And then there's always the realization that this one kind of hit me too. This was another one from Rima. Leadership transitions are akin to remodeling the train cars while you're laying new track in front of you as the train is speeding along, and we're serving dinner to the passengers, and maybe even building a bridge over the river at the same time, which is pretty much to say that this is complex, messy stuff. And the more advanced planning you can do, the more likely you won't spill dinner in your passenger's lap. And again, I'm not a big fan of planning, but I do recognize that failure to plan is a plan to fail. And I like this little twist on it. This guy in the corporate world, I came across Alan Lakin. This quote is variously attributed to these folks, but he added the, you know, failure to plan for problems is a plan to fail. Think about that. If you're just going along and you're not making any specific plans and everything's working fine, there's no pandemic, there's no fires, there's nobody stealing money from the station, everything's going to work fine. But if you have failed to plan for those kind of problems, that's when things get difficult. So I thought I'd help people get started, and I started a Google Doc, and I'll share the link to this. And everybody who has a copy of the link has edit capability. So I want this to be sort of a crowdsourced document, kind of like the station automation document that I started a couple years ago. It's basically a template for transition planning. And the thing that I noticed with transition plan templates that I found on the Google, they all have the technical stuff, right? They're, you know, check marks for who has passwords, or make sure that your station has subscribed to a password manager. Make sure that the keys are shared and that nobody has the, you know, all the main stuff. You know, make sure your financial stuff is planned for, all that stuff. The thing that I noticed was missing from all these example templates that I found online is that they don't say anything about dealing with the station's culture as you transition into new people. And so what I want to do is make this document something that includes that, and a document that explicitly mentions the preservation or the shaking up of your station's culture. So I just thought that might be a difference between, you know, you just going out and looking for these on the internet. This might be a more interesting place to start. So this is just a screenshot from the first page of the document, and I'll share the link at the end of the thing. And also this, I'll make this presentation available as well. Yeah. So I'm just about wrapped up. Here are some of the links. And again, you can either take a screenshot of this or just download the presentation, because these are all live links, and they go to, you know, the YouTube panel discussion on succession planning. And there's a couple of things that I thought would be helpful for folks. So
And I'll have this uploaded too on our roundtable page.
Okay, great. Thanks, Stephanie. So again, thanks to these folks that helped me out, and I'd love to keep this going with a discussion.
Thanks, David. That was awesome.
Thank you.
Any thoughts?
David, as chief engineer of both of our community stations from day one, the hardest thing for me to do is to document everything I know. Any suggestions? It just seems daunting and boring. And
Yeah, I totally get that. I'm horrible at it too. The best suggestion that I have come across, and I actually used to do this when I worked at the internet service companies, find someone that's interested in helping you, and the first thing they get to do is document what they learn as they go. Yeah, and I know you laugh because I totally get it, because I have had at stations that I've been with, getting people to help with the technical stuff is sometimes the hardest, right? And that part I don't know how to deal with that. I don't have an answer for that. But if you can find somebody that's interested in helping you with the technical stuff, make it clear to them when you're getting going with them that step one is going to be write down the stuff that they learned about what you're doing. And the other thing is that it's not going to look anything like what you would write. And you have to be okay with that, I think. You have to let go of, either it's not thorough enough, or it's in a different form than you would write it, or something like that. So I think, as I was transitioning away from WDRT, I was in the same position. I built the station literally. And I just had to let go of the fact that the person that was going to replace what I did wasn't going to do it the same way. So those are my little teeny bits of insight on bringing new people in and getting stuff documented.
that's helpful. Thanks.
Sure.
David, when you think about what this, like when you think of it in concrete terms, do you visualize one document that kind of pulls it all together, or do you visualize a suite of different documents and online, so in the cloud holders of information, or how do you visualize it? That's I've always had trouble with that, like visualizing what it all is.
Honestly, I haven't gotten very far with that because I'm not at a station right now where it needs to be done. Although I'm getting more and more involved with KFAI, and they've recently gone through a transition. But I think it starts with a single document, and that is your sort of the station's overriding transition or succession plan. And maybe from there, if you have enough people, you could have like your development coordinator, or your music coordinator, or program director, or whatever. Each of them could have individual documents for their department or their area of expertise. But I think it starts with one sort of overall umbrella guiding document that sort of lays down the station's approach to transition or succession planning. And where it is, whether it's on paper or in the cloud or on one or more hard drives, I think that's totally up to your station's culture and how you guys do things. I mean, I don't think it matters. It seems like documents in the cloud, as long as you trust the cloud provider, are often easier. The thing I love about Google Docs, I hate putting anything in Google, but you can't deny that Google Docs and the ability for multiple people to edit them simultaneously is super convenient. So if there are other options for that, so if people are interested in that, you could explore other options. I think whatever works for your station, though, if I assume
Yeah,
that,
it's funny how that's kind of a devil in the detail type of thing.
yeah,
Something about
but
deciding what platform to use is kind of turns out to be a sticking point, because different platforms people end up using different platforms, and then it very quickly disperses again, and new people come in and want to use a different platform, and it's weird how that decision alone really builds in a lot of kind of entropy to it.
yeah,
It's hard
that's a good
to see
point. It's a
that.
great point. I haven't thought a whole lot about it, but I have experienced it, and I agree with you that it's one of those. I think, not to get too philosophical on you, but I think it's because where the internet is still so new, evolutionarily. We've only been doing this online stuff for 25, 30 years, and I think we still haven't figured out how to do it right.
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So, like you, David, I'm, not a big fan of putting everything in Google, but you can't deny the ability to let multiple people share from wherever they are in the world those
Mm-hmm.
documents. And being a college radio station, basically I have succession every year,
Yeah, good point.
you know, and
Yeah,
and so it's really easy for things to get lost. The institutional memory is maybe a 4-year cycle.
sure.
Um, and so we have a document for every board position, so that even if the person who was previously in that position just left and didn't assist in training anyone, we at least have a basic document that describes what the position is, what the basic responsibilities are, what the typical week might be in what they do.
Mm-hmm.
And it took many years over time to kind of develop that, and I would still say it's not a great document, but at least we have something in paper or on Google Docs
Mm-hmm.
that we can refer to for every single position.
So Kevin, do you then have a one email address that is associated with those Google Docs, or how do you decide where the Google, like what is the home email for that Google Doc? Because I found with Google Docs is people start to create their own, and then it starts to spread itself out over different email addresses.
It's always a challenge to keep it, contained, but basically we have email addresses linked to our website. So WTSR.org is our website, and through that web service, we have emails. So we have, production at WTSR.org, station manager at WTSR, and all those people share a Google Doc or a Google folder called Board of Directors, and everyone can contribute. Everybody has access. I think it's officially under the station manager's email address, but that email address stays with the station. It doesn't belong to any individual.
It's almost like you need a generic email address just for
Mhm.
Google Docs.
Yeah, this is exactly one of those cultural things that I'm talking about. It's like, how does your station stay organized? And it's huge. Yeah, I don't know how, that's why I'm not a station manager.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
um,
in
No
answer,
kidding.
in answer to the emails, they belong to the station. They don't belong to that individual. When they become station manager, we give them
they
access
get the
to
credentials to
station
that. Yeah.
manager at WTSR.org.
That's the other thing about this is that these documents have to be living documents. Like you can't just say, well, we wrote that, we're done, yep, check that off our list. It's, you've got to go and update them constantly.
Yearly.
It seems to me like then this guy who's speaking now, the college guy,
Kevin.
could
Yeah.
add some nice experience to that Google Doc, since goes through it every 4 years. I think he's got some valuable knowledge there.
Yeah, I just had a meeting with my executive board today, and we decided that as a duty of the executive board, every year they will have to update these documents to keep them usable.
And your executive board is all students, right?
The entire station is students, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So now in their document, so for station manager, in their station manager document, it will say one of their responsibilities is to yearly update all the documents.
Yeah.
And all the documents collectively we call our constitution.
Mm-hmm.
So does someone very special hold the keys to logging in to your account on the FCC and where the license is held and that sort of thing? Is that a highly trusted person?
That's me. Because I'm an employee of the college which owns the license. So anything that has to do with the FCC is my login. But we have logins to, Spotify and other software, and typically I will have access to that software in addition to the student who has access to that.
So this specific item is the first thing that came to my mind when I started thinking about succession planning. What if the person who has all the passwords to everything goes away and takes those passwords with them? And the way that I have found, and I've done this at several stations, and I did it at when I worked in my previous lives in IT at the internet service places. The way you get around the password issue specifically, or the way you deal with it, you don't get around it, is by using a password manager, and you pay for a paid license. So there's a couple of brands that I like, and one of them, I'm going to mute for a second and clear my throat. Sorry. Couple of the brands that I like are 1Password and LastPass. And you can just Google those. But basically what you can do is have either, sometimes they're called team accounts or sometimes they're just called business accounts. You can have, again, Daveen, you have that one trusted person is the manager of that account. And you put all of your station passwords in it. And then you sign up each person that needs those passwords as a user. And then you share those passwords with them, and you can control that. So if they leave the station, you can just either delete them as a user or unshare all those passwords. These are proven ways to do it. All the brands that I know of store the passwords in the cloud, but they've also gone through security audit after security audit after security audit. Constantly they're being audited. And when I signed up for LastPass 4 or 5 years ago, I thought I was giving all this stuff away, and it was crazy to me. But I dug into it, because I'm a nerd, and I learned that, first of all, the code that implemented all this was audited. The data center where they store these in the cloud was audited, and they go through regular audits. And so I feel much better about using these kinds of services, and I trust them. And sure, maybe someday they're going to get breached, but the way that they do their encryption, even if they get hacked and broken into, you're not going to lose your stuff. So the hardest thing for me was to overcome trusting somebody else with that. And now I bet I have hundreds and hundreds of passwords, and I keep them in the cloud. And it's way more convenient because I don't have to worry about it. And when I set it up at WDRT, we just put all of, we put the FCC passwords in there. We put the, all the services, our Nautel account, everything. So, our bookkeeper used it for, she uses QuickBooks. And so we've got all that in there. So it's, I can't recommend doing that enough. That one thing alone, I think, will help sort of smooth things out, smooth workflow at the station in general, regardless of succession.
Well, the reason that I ask is that we had some people abscond with our passwords in the beginning. We were able to get those back. But my understanding is the station in Baton Rouge, some trusted person absconded with their license for 3 or 4 years.
Oh, wow.
That long for the true recipient of the license to get it back. So, that if you have access to that, to your license on the FCC, you have to be really careful with who has access to that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because somebody can walk away with your license.
Yeah. A risk that came with the digital age, right?
We've been working to kind of build up a communal consensus basis for our station using actually AudioPort. Thank you, Ursula, has been very helpful in kind of allowing each of our producers to start taking responsibility for their own shows. If they're working live, they're working with the confessor, they're downloading, they're uploading. So everybody's kind of in it on themselves. This has built up the, everybody's trusting each other, working with each other in a strong fashion. So a lot of our information on, what happens if the stream goes down, what happens if the broadcast goes down, all of that information we have up on our website, and we have a producer login that everybody can access it. What we found is that we've weeded out the bad players by the time they get that access. The difficulty is that most people forget how to get in to the producers network. So we also have, we've gotten now about a dozen people who share that information and can pass it out, and that's being helped by everybody starting to train each other and work on each other's shows more and more. And it's just, and then the really important information, we entrust with our overseeing board of directors, but that itself comes with problems too.
Yeah. So Paul, in your case, I know you've got some motivation for this succession planning. And
yeah, I lit a fire under myself, and I'm planning to leave next summer.
yeah.
So I'm training like crazy, and I kind of work similar to yours, where I'll like take pulling all that information out of Al Davis's head, putting it down onto paper, then passing it on to somebody else who tries to make sure it makes sense. And I'll get to you soon, David, pulling that information out of your head. But as I told you earlier, I wasn't ready for it yet.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's all starting to come together. And, one of the primary things, I'm trying to get everything so it's largely automated by the time I leave. So then those people who will be overseeing it will be overseeing the logs for each day to make sure that nothing pops up out of the ordinary, and they know how to fix it in any of the problems pretty easily. And I'll stay in touch. And everybody's pretty much doing it virtually at this point, which in an odd way, the pandemic has been very, the challenges of it have been very useful this year in terms of spreading how we deal with things.
Yeah, but you're also establishing a culture of sharing the load, or sharing the responsibility for doing this, and or sharing the responsibility, and also empowering individuals at the station to help with that. And I think that's awesome.
It's
the
been
question,
hard, and it makes like using handing out titles doesn't work as well in that situation. We would have way too many.
sure, good point. Yeah.
You know, and the next challenge is to get people to work in committee format. But until that point, we have a lot of people who are fine at working on their own. But that's sort of the truth of most of our producers are used to working on their own too.
So there's the recommendation. All of your goals at your stations are to plan to leave, like plan to move out of the country, like Paul's doing, in a year, and pass off all your responsibilities or distribute those with other people.
Yeah.
And then we'll all meet in Italy, wherever you're going, Paul.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, yeah. And then the next person can do the same thing.
Yeah, right.
I'm even passing on our house for the year. We'll be away. So to one of the producers. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's working.
Paul, I wanted to ask, have you been writing some of the steps, like these procedures? Have you been writing them so that maybe, you know, we can all share, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel?
This is what I make long lists that I'm going to do. I'm going to translate it all. Right now, it's on all sorts of scraps of paper that I've been organizing, and then I'll have them written down. But I'm usually pretty good at getting them in shape. You know, this was after writing kind of station handbooks, pledge drive handbooks, all of this stuff over recent years. And you write it, and then you realize, like on the underwriting, I realized I had worked in discounts that were too deep. So then I had to retract them all. But I told everybody who has been signing up for underwriting that we're going to double the rates in 6 months. And they're fine with that because they're very low right now. But it's brought everybody in and allowed us to sustain. That was the other key was I actually started covering a lot of the ongoing costs which hadn't been covered. People were not paying things on time. So I started setting up accounts, and I covered a lot out of my own pocket to start with. And then now that we have a body of money coming in, it's all been set up onto an account that pays automatically our, our digital rights, our, sound exchange, all those pesky little things that, try to suck us dry and catch us at some point. And so, and also a lot of, I've set up with a lot of outside entities that we can turn to for help. Again, David has been very helpful. We're even considering putting people on retainer just, to help us. Similarly with Pacifica, with taking our stream through there and some of our other means, it simplified things so that I didn't have to burden the rest of the organization with that, and it allowed us over the last year to really concentrate on getting people producing, and we have people who are doing their shows on WhatsApp and forwarding it, and we get it on the radio within 15 minutes. And and then from there, they get such pride in what they're doing that they then learn Audacity, and then they learn the next step and the next step. And so it's all been kind of pushing forward towards what I hope will be sustainability moving forward. But I'll have it all written out by April 15th.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Do you, where are you located, Paul?
Albany, WCAA.
Nice, okay.
So.
Would you be willing to share your written out documents once you got them?
Definitely.
Okay, cool. Well, I'll look forward to that. Does anyone else have any thoughts today?
Thanks, David. Great presentation. Definitely something that's hard to get around to finding the time to think about, but we definitely all need to. So thank you. It's good to have something to go by. So thank you so much. Very helpful.
Yeah. Thanks for the conversation. I think that was good.
And I hope that the links that you mentioned, I hope you put them. Thank you so very much. It was wonderful. Now I'm terrified. Of course, now I'm terrified.
Be careful.
Yeah, right.
I'll have the
Thank you.
I'll have the presentation uploaded tomorrow on our webpage on Pacifica Network on the roundtable. So you can just go back and find those links. So this should be simple. I had one
Thank you very much.
question too. Is there anything you guys want to talk about next week? I think I have some ideas written down, but I thought I would just check if you guys had anything on your mind that you wanted to share or have someone else share.
Definitely one of our board members just recommended that we as a board address something which is, I think, interesting for us all to think about is the approach of the vaccines and what station policy might be in terms of people being vaccinated and being allowed back into the station. How will your station deal with that situation?
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah, that's very good.
Along that line, we've been working with a number of agencies around the city, and that includes some of the state agencies who are all worried about, especially the communities we service or serve, are not trusting of vaccines or anything and how to get the word out. And what we're doing starting on Monday is we'll have these, it's an 1 minute and 15 second, almost like a PSA in different voices that will have the COVID numbers for that day and then the vaccine and where the vaccine information is. And we have asked all our producers to shorten their pieces a bit so that we can run them every hour. And we did this with the census and with voting and throughout the past year with all the COVID information that we were passing around. And we found that rather than do a formal show, that constant repetition in kind of unprofessional voices goes a lot farther in terms of, at least with our community, in terms of engaging and getting that information across.
Excellent. And on that note, I think we're about done. And I want to thank you again, Paul, for joining us. It's nice to see a new face. And I also wanted to say thoughts and prayers and wishes and hopes and dreams for Jean, hope you get well soon. You look like, hopefully maybe it's COVID light. If you're able to join us today, that's a good sign. And
I
yeah,
hope so. That's the way it's feeling, COVID light for now.
good. Keep it that way. And we'll see everyone next week. I think that's a good idea from Sharon. We'll talk about everyone's approach to promoting the vaccine and talking about the vaccine on air. And until then, it's been good to see you. We haven't seen you guys for a while, some break. It's been good to see everyone's faces, and we'll see you again next time.
Yep. It's good to see you all. Thanks.
Bye-bye. Thank you, David.
Thanks for putting it
Thanks.
together, Stephanie. See ya.
You bet.
Thanks, Dave.